take your protein pills. The Poisoned Electrick Head story. Brian Carney. Chapter 16. Henry 77. The Trewargy Tree Fair was tentatively announced sometime in the summer of 1989. It wasn't so much Cornwall's answer to Glastonbury, more like a footnote boasting such cutting-edge luminaries as the Climax Blues Band and the Hypnotics amongst its main stage draws. More interestingly, the ubiquitous Wango Rally stage was to be in attendance, and therefore magnetic north for all half-decent crusty counterculture bands. As always, our location in the less electrically charged north of England, coupled with our slacker apathy, meant that we missed the boat in the mad scramble for inclusion in the lineup. After some extensive mithering down the phone, however, we were given a shaky seat on the substitute bench should anyone fail to show up. This was a red rag to a bullshitter, and as we counted at least 2 of those in our ranks, in no time we were pissed up and southbound. At some point along the line, Doug had bailed out, frustrated with 7 arseholes to contend with. Or maybe he felt that we didn't respect him enough. It's a safe bet that Simon Napier Bell was never dangled by his ankles over a stairwell on a regular basis, or manhandled headfirst into a sleeping bag and thrown into a room containing a band in mid-song. On a business level, I wasn't sorry to see him go. It had all got too complicated, and neither party felt overly served by the other. But he was fun, and we had some good nights out together. Certainly nobody ever said about him that they would only trust him as far as they could throw him. Possibly because in Doug's case that was actually quite a long way. Transit, as we all know through bitter experience, stands for 10 rat-arsed knobheads skulking in there, and is thus best avoided. Certainly it's an environment the uninitiated should enter guardedly. We knew this only too well, and were therefore reluctant to inflict our mobile atrocities on unsuspecting hitchhikers. Plus, if truth be known, we were downright unsociable. I've seen band members disappear into DOS bags at the first sign of company, with a timidity and stealth that makes a midnight badger watch look like the kids from Fame. So the uneasy rustlings and bolting for cover were to be expected when Billy suddenly slowed down to pick up a gentleman of the road. Cries of protest fell on deaf ears as we ground to a halt, and the air positively crackled with dread and the sound of beer cans being hastily concealed. The monosyllabic gibberish and in-jokes we passed off as conversation were barely comprehensible to people we knew, let alone outsiders, so it was just as well our passenger was even more of a space cadet than the rest of us put together. He looked like the old guy in the long johns from Grizzly Adams, and his accent quickly disclosed him as American, as if to complete the picture. He wasn't the usual Mad Max 2 extra we normally encountered, and as it transpired, he was pretty far removed from your average American tourist as well. How far? Try Venus. He introduced himself as Henry 77. Surnames weren't usually required in our circles, or surnumbers even, but in his case it was obviously integral to the plot, which thickened around him as he spoke. He'd changed it by deed poll because 77 was a mystic number, something no serious hitchhiker would leave home without. Obviously. And it didn't stop there. He was on a mission to find the Holy Grail. The story unfolded thus. At some point during a successful Silicon Valley career, he had stumbled across long-lost ancient knowledge hinting at the artifact's location, and jaded with his materialistic lifestyle, had packed it all in and set off in hot pursuit. Naturally, he wasn't the only one on the trail, as covert FBI agents had twigged his little plan and were trailing his every move, waiting to pounce once he unearthed the booty. He was at a crucial stage in the proceedings, bound for King Arthur country, but fearful for his life at the hands of J. Edgar's men in black. He needed somewhere to hole up for a few days, somewhere he would blend in and be hard to find. What happened next was as predictable as an episode of The Incredible Hulk, in a shirt cuff caught in the clothes press kind of way. We asked him to come with us. If you want to hide a grain of sand, try the beach, and ditto for old hippies and rock festivals. The itinerary settled, we offered him a seat, and to his credit he didn't reply, "No thanks, I'm hiding Excalibur up my arse," but relaxed into position and began to really open up. If this were a film, this would be the optimum moment to cross-fade into the past with a nice wobbly special effect. But as it wasn't, we had to rely on cheap and nasty booze to recreate the sensation. Henry wasn't short on theories, and his current favourite was the spiral. To quote the man, "It's in the waves crashing on the shore, in the shape of a crustacean shell. It's in the pattern of the Milky Way and the galaxy itself. It's in the air. It's everywhere." I resisted the urge to slip into cat in the hat mode and reply, "Can I find it in a snail? Can I find it on a nail? Can I find it on the grail?" etc. Another was his firm belief in the familiarity breeds contempt concept. "Do you guys know the mothers of invention?" he asked. This was like asking Muslim fundamentalists if they knew the Quran. He continued by saying the mothers stayed together until they hated each other's guts. I could see where he was coming from, but I felt that we stayed together because we hated each other's guts. God, I wouldn't co-conspire into this lifestyle with someone I liked. Our friendship wouldn't last a day. No, we had something that transcended friendship and loathing and hovered resolutely above the two. We were each other's saviour and nemesis simultaneously, and that was about as balanced as the universe could get, spiral or no spiral. Henry continued to belt them out, mainly to Billy, who had vacated driving duties in order to get a better vantage point, and the two of them sat animatedly head-to-head for the remainder of the journey. Christ only knows what twisted fables were exchanged between them. They looked like a set of Geppetto novelty bookends. Eventually we reached Trewargy, somewhat the worse for wear, and settled into what was becoming a not unpleasant alternate reality scenario, mildly enhanced by our tenuous status as on-site performers. After locating Billy's girlfriend's entourage, who had arrived earlier, it was the usual hijinks of drinking binges and tomfoolery, as he tried to secure a firmer performance arrangement. AF had inexplicably acquired a trials bike from some gullible source and was puttering around the site in his devil mask and admiral's uniform, causing untold confusion. I remember him stopping in front of the stage, midway through a crusty comedian's set, who interrupted his joke to exclaim, "Fuck me, it's the devil," I think in genuine disbelief rather than seeking an improvised laugh. Henry, meanwhile, was having a great time. On arriving, he had bounded off, not wishing to spend too long with us for fear of some contempt creeping in, perhaps, and had thrown himself into proceedings with the gusto of men half his age. I bumped into him one afternoon, and as we walked a while, he was suddenly captivated by a nearby market stall. He became excited at the sight of the fractal posters on sale, gesticulating wildly, pointing and screaming Don Quixote-like, "The spiral! The spiral!" His theories instantly vindicated and embraced by UK counterculture. His joy could only have been further heightened by the sudden discovery of a mysterious grail-shaped knoll lurking in the immediate vicinity. Things were looking less rosy, however, on the stage front. The running schedule was rammed to capacity on all 3 days, and there were no signs of anyone dropping out. If every band trimmed their set by 5 minutes, we'd be in with a shout, and for Frank Zappa, some of them might even have considered it. But we had to face facts that we weren't the most popular act in town, especially with other bands. People were wary of us. We were unpredictable northerners, uncultured in the subtle nuances of home county's urban crusty etiquette. North-South divide prejudice was written through us like a stick of rock. We were arrogant, elitist, aggressive, and the best band on the circuit by light years. In short, we were arseholes. The only reason Wangos continued to give us the time of day was that we always put on a good show, and we played like our lives depended on it. But the way things were looking, not this weekend. The only thing to do was see what fate would throw in our direction, and in the meantime enjoy the festival, and Trewargy had some bizarre and entertaining diversions to offer. Enough to surprise even the most seasoned and jaded traveller, or rich student in denial. The toilet facilities, for instance, were woefully inadequate, yet anyone venturing into the woods for a more natural experience was set upon by bomber-jacketed security armed with baseball bats. In surely the biggest organisational gaffe since the Stones at Altamont, A team of trigger-happy psychos had been hired to punish the tiniest infraction with swift, brutal retribution. It was the Boys in the Hood meets Woodstock, and for anyone who escaped a beating, there was a dead sheep in the water supply. So that's what they meant when they said anthrax might be appearing. But undeterred, we carried on, diligently avoiding the intake or release of water without due care and attention. Sometime Saturday evening, Billy returned with exciting news. The stage crew had agreed to work an extra hour or so, and we could follow the last act. But as this was the mighty Hawkwind, extra security would be required at the front of the stage, and that's where we came in. If we were prepared to endure the onslaught of thousands of crusty, drug-addled lunatics spewing forth, brewed up, lemming-like and maybe even lemmy-like, then the gig was ours. In true King Canute fashion, we accepted. The front of the stage consisted of a moat-like space, approximately 4 feet deep. It was cordoned off by that flimsy wooden fencing you remember climbing over as a kid, which was like Cro-Magnon man's early attempts at spears, strung together with wire. It wasn't a token effort, it was fucking symbolic. The pseudo-elegant rope and chrome cordons from the listening bank would have been as effective, possibly more so with their subliminal regal effect, purposely designed to keep peasants at bay. At the appointed time, after some fantastic performances by the Magic Mushroom Band and Osric Tentacles, we took our positions, evenly spaced, facing the point-blank momentary calm, dreadlocks, enlarged pupils, bristles and halitosis. Sweat rose and evaporated into the night sky. The atmosphere, a curious mix of Mel in Mad Max 2 and Michael in Zulu. I can't remember exactly how the concert began. Hawkwind rarely go for the hello and good evening approach. I'm sure it was more the uneasy ambience of a UFO landing in a sea of dry ice and dismembered android voices shouting, "Do not panic." This was easy for them to say. From where I was, panicking seemed like the only rational option as the crowd surged forward. My fellow insecurity men were quickly swept from view in the chaos. But we had an obligation to keep, so I held my post for, at least 5 minutes before clawing my way out. My dejected feelings of shame quickly evaporated, however, on entering the van, where I found half the band sitting bruised and battered in the gloom. The stage crew were as good as their word, though, and after a humongous 2-hour set, Dave Brock announced our imminent appearance as special guests. By now it was 2 a.m, pissing it down, and only the foolhardy would attempt to follow such a performance. But we didn't care. We were the Leckheads. We played like our lives depended on it. Once the music started, some people left their tents to brave the rain. Others stayed in the dry and listened. And Henry 77? Who knows? We never saw him again. But I hope he saw the show, and I hope he found what he was looking for. Chapter 17, Trewargie, The Voyage Home. After the festival, we loaded up the van and geared up for the long journey back up north. Billy's girlfriend Lisa and her small entourage had parted company with the guy who had given them a lift down there, so they were coming back with us. This meant that when we set off, the van contained 12 people, 2 bull terriers, a Doberman and a baby. Space was limited, to say the least. It was that bad that Andy requested that we stop at the first available town because he wanted to get out. The reason he gave for this somewhat extreme course of action was that, in his words, "I'm not a bastard flamingo." For the last 30 miles he'd been stood on one leg. It was a crazy idea, but nobody tried to dissuade him. More room for us. When we reached Exeter, he disembarked and P went with him. Nature hates a vacuum, and within seconds everyone had reshuffled to grab those extra inches of comfort. And we settled into an uneasy equilibrium. The baby was asleep, the dogs also. In fact, apart from the driver, it was like an average morning round at Bagpussy's place. It was oddly peaceful for such a mobile menagerie. It had been a long weekend and we were all exhausted. And that's why Billy's eyelids weighed more than Saturn and time stood still. It was maybe just for a matter of seconds, but enough for us to drift into the wrong lane. He came to, and realising the situation, jerked the wheel with a mighty force, causing the van to swerve mightily to the left. The effect in the back was cataclysmic. Dogs barked, the baby cried, boys shouted, girls screamed. Equipment flew through the air. A crystal chandelier exploded in slow motion. 2 large planets collided, and the god of chaos let roar his mighty laugh to inform us of his presence. There was really no need. No matter how many people we crammed into the van, there was always room for him. What I can't figure out is why he didn't get out with P and Andy. They appeared back in town a few days later. A local farmer had seen them, and instead of peppering the rogues with 2 barrels of finest buckshot, he offered them a couple of days' work building a barn. It still stands today and bears these 3 words above the door: Poisoned Electrick Shed. Chapter 18. The day Do It got done over. Battle of the Bands contests. Are they a good thing? Nobody ever hit the big time on the back of one, but they can be a good source of revenue or a shortcut to releasing products depending on the prize. Certainly that was our attitude towards them. And after winning one in High Wycombe sometime in 1987, which provided us with a single, Trickaroo Cap of Flies, we decided to try for another that was offering a big cash prize. It seemed to make good business sense, seeing as if no record companies were going to bankroll us, then we may as well go out there and take what was up for grabs. And we were such mercenary bastards that there was no question in our minds of us not winning. In the opening heats, you felt almost sorry for some of the competition, their mums and dads looking on helplessly as we smacked them round the head and took their dinner money. Little Johnny's shining pop hopes ground into the dust by a bunch of tuneless freaks in cockroach masks. Only as you approached the semi-finals did you feel the competitive edge increase and start spotting the same cocky arrogance in the eyes of the opposition. All the telltale signs were in place: the rock star swagger, the custom-built instruments, personalised plectrums and sticker-adorned flight cases, the corkscrew perms, the drop-dead trophy girlfriends clinging onto a pretty boy's arm for a long-shot stake in the high life, the camel hair coat-wearing businessmen giving ill-informed stage directions. It was a sight to behold, and we sat amongst this anthropological floor show, reeking of ale and sweat, bereft of roadies and weekend retail Svengalis, biding our time, ready to pounce. As in the previous contest, we strode relatively unhampered into the final, upsetting swathes of showbiz mums along the way. It was set to be a grand affair in Bradford St George's Hall, with 12 bands all vying for the coveted title and cash. In these things, originality counts, if only to ensure a varied day's entertainment for the punters. Thus, we were up against a balanced mix of genres. Another thing we were quick to learn was that whoever wins, as far as everyone else is concerned, it's a fix. What else can account for the travesty of justice the results represent? But comforting a myth as this appears when applied to the favourite, it doesn't hold up to scrutiny when a complete outsider walks off with the booty. And in this contest, it was clear who the favourite was, and brother, we weren't it. Bradford locals Do It were a seasoned pub rock combo, sitting somewhere between experienced and long in the tooth, with a neat line in no-nonsense blues. They had no doubt romped into the final without breaking a sweat, and as they were scheduled to go on last, and had brought 6 coachloads of fans with them, it didn't take an IQ of hawking proportions to work out which way the deck was stacked. As the day went on, the steady escalation of Do It fever slowly spread through St George's Hall's several balconies and bar areas, though we were pleased to discover that one bar on the 3rd floor had been commandeered as Lecky territory and was occupied by the single coachload of fans we'd managed to bring. The lineup was roughly divided into rock, Cage, Strongheart, China White, Punk, Dog Soldier, Pop, Twice Around the Houses, Eat the Peach, Mercy Mercy, One Man's Medicine, The Gospel, Blues, Do It, Mikey Boy Stiletto, and ourselves, who performed in 7th position. We did our thing along with the others, and by the time Do It took to the stage, the place was replete with banners bearing their name. and a sizable mob at the front, chanting their mantra, oblivious that in a not-too-distant but infinitely shallower future, it would become a byword for fascist corporate scum footwear. Rising to the occasion, Do It put in a faultless performance, featuring all the hallmarks one would expect from accomplished bluesmen, as the crowd bayed and hooted with each well-worn riff. I was sat in a stairwell between floors with Tim, a colleague from the Dead Fly, bemoaning this last-minute show of professionalism as the impeccably executed but predictable sounds reverberated upwards. He was clearly unimpressed, assuring me that no judge worth his salt would side with such run-of-the-mill fare, and that the verdict would bear him out. I myself was far from convinced, and could only imagine a third or fourth place with at least some prize to show for our efforts. After the performances, some announcements were made by a bloke called the Insect Inspector, who emerged from a giant transparent sphere and gathered all the bands together on stage to hear the results. Fourth, third and second duly went to other groups, and the concept of originality counting was brought home, as something purely to ensure a varied day's entertainment for the punters. The inevitability of what was to follow growing with every announcement, until it became almost pointless remaining on stage. The crowd began chanting "Do It" repeatedly, right up to the tearing of the final envelope, when an induced hush fell upon them, as the winning name was dramatically unveiled in teasing textbook fashion. And the winner is Poisoned Electrick Head. Those three words hung in the air so long, you could practically reach out and touch them, though it wasn't as if there was much other noise to distract from them. Most of the auditorium were embroiled in a stunned, muted silence, brought on by shock and disbelief. The only pocket of celebration was our frenzied followers at the front of the stage, and ourselves, of course, who were leaping around and baying like deranged coyotes. Bill did a lap of honour of the stage with me on his shoulders, and we gave the high five to our fans down the front, barely aware that the atmosphere in the hall had changed from one of disbelief to anger and resentment. No one was chanting "Do It" anymore. The word on everyone's lips now was "fix." Some of the other bands wished us all the best, but most of them silently evaporated. Do It were particularly swift to do one, so all that remained was to thank the organisers and head home to celebrate. Meanwhile, things were not looking so good outside the hall, where several coaches had arrived, awaiting their occupants, and among the dour multitude, it wasn't difficult to spot the victorious minority. Our fan base hadn't really changed since the days of the aristocrats. It had simply got bigger and more dangerous, and now included some serious loose cannons that had cottoned on to the collective booze and drugs-oriented good time that following our band could provide. I think that single factor was instrumental in us becoming enormous locally in a very short time. Cash-hungry promoters in struggling labour clubs were happy to turn a blind eye to the rife drug consumption in return for the colossal bar takings they could accrue. They didn't even want to cut to the door, and if the local police knew what went on at our shows, they were equally happy to look the other way, as long as there was no trouble. Incredibly, despite the heady mix of punks, hippies, straights, potheads and scallies, all under one roof, I can't recall there ever being any fights. Except at this one. I suppose it was inevitable that after a 9-hour event, some pissed-up Do It fans would come looking for someone to take their anger out on. But they chose the wrong guys. On our coach that night, there were some mean hombres, and the biggest and meanest of them was Robbo, a bearded mountain of a man who would have looked more at home in a pioneer Midwest logging town. He was placid enough most of the time. As long as he had a spliff and a can, he was as happy as Larry, but only a fool would deliberately provoke him. And he wasn't the only one. There were a host of others not on first-name terms with turning the other cheek. So it all got cruel and unusual before you could say, "Don't do it." I don't know the gruesome details, but at one point Robbo picked a guy up and threw him into one of the coaches, shattering the windscreen. And impressive a feat as this was, the shine was taken off it a little for the rest of the fans, when they realised it was their own coach he'd just smashed up. Still, in every battle there are casualties, and the guy who perhaps suffered the most in this one was the driver, who not only had to endure a damaged coach and a busload of blood-stained, pissed-up maniacs, but had his worst nightmare come true when it broke down on the way home, and they were stranded for 3 hours until a replacement came out. As for us, we couldn't travel for more than a minute without someone breaking into a wee-hoo, which we all joined in on, laughing hysterically as cider bottles were passed around. All in all, it was a fine day out, and aside from losing the deposit on the coach, when we rang to inquire about it, the tirade of abuse that came down the phone was enough to persuade us not to push the matter. We came out of the whole thing smelling of roses, not to mention $2,000 better off. Chapter 19. Crowd Pleasers. As Swiss Tony from The Fast Show might put it, pleasing an audience is like making love to a beautiful woman. Well, we knew as much about pleasing audiences as Swiss Tony knows about women. Don't get me wrong, we could bang them against the headboard all night until their eyes rolled and the neighbours complained. That was no problem. It was the foreplay we were no good at. From the 4 drumstick clicks onwards, we were spellbound, lost in music. But the second the song ended, the spell was broken, and we were just plain lost. We were like hapless hypnotist victims suddenly coming to on the bar with our trousers down. P and Andy tried to establish some continuity and rapport with the crowd, but the results were shaky at best, and more often than not, it all ended in tears. Telford Community Centre. This gig was cursed from the word go. Upon starting the atmospheric opening number, we quickly discovered there was no sound from most of the keyboards. So as we scrambled around trying to fix the problem, the guitars maintained a monotonous one-note drone. I threw in the odd sonic bubble, but after a few minutes it began to get grating, especially when AF clicked into Mongolian throat wobbler mode. There's only so much pseudo-Eastern psychobabble an audience can take, and AF's proposals to take them on a ride did little to placate the hecklers. We eventually got going, but the damage had been done as a hostile element took up position on the balcony above the stage, a position that afforded a poor view of the show, but was strategically perfect for throwing pint glasses of water over us, which they commenced doing with gusto. Some sort of chain system must have been in place between the bogs and the balcony, as the downpour was relentless and soon began taking its toll on the electrical equipment beneath. The keyboards were the first casualty. They spluttered and detuned before packing in altogether, and other instruments also began to suffer, along with the performance, which was failing to win much support elsewhere in the room. As the situation escalated, the singer's intersong diplomatic pleas for sanity became increasingly fractious, and far from diffusing the situation, in the end they simply exacerbated it. It all came to a head in the middle of 20th Century Man, when AF decided enough was enough and invited the entire audience outside to get beat to fuck. Not sure what to do for the best, the rest of us continued playing as he screamed blue murder down the microphone, his outrage gaining a surreal poignancy by being set to music. Fuck off, you fucking scum. Get your fucking face down here, you shitbag. Get your face down here, you shitbag. P continued with the verse, punctuated occasionally by AF's venomous cries of shitbags. It was our habit in those days to record each gig through the mixing desk, and this one was thankfully no exception. As in rock and roll comedy moments, it's up there with the Trogs tapes. When the song finally crashed to an undignified halt, AF seized the moment to continue his blistering tirade, which deserves to be reproduced here in its full demented glory.
Right then, shitbag! Who the fuck's throwing water, you shit? Get your fucking face down here and let's get beat to fuck! Shitbag! Who's throwing water, shit? Get down, you get your fucking face down here! Get your fucking shitty little cowardism face down here! Shitbag!
Well.
Shit!
That's the best thing
Shit!
he's sung all night.
He's a nice man, really.
Shit bags!
This one's about babies. Especially mine. Even though I have none.
See what I mean? Total bollocks. Mind you, I bet those guys thought twice about trying that with the band again. And at the end of the gig, they were nowhere to be seen. You can't tell Telford. Liverpool Fun Day. It seemed like a dream ticket on paper, playing to a home crowd on a sunny summer's day, in the open air with a prime spot on the bill. Even the PA and stage facilities were being provided by our old muckers Gobber, ex-Radio Mongolia, and Wang O'Reilly's respectively, so we knew everyone involved right down to the stage crew. So what could go wrong? Plenty. I wandered around the fields of Sefton Park, taking in the scene of face-painted kiddies alongside hippie types, squatted on the grass clutching 3-litre cider bottles. Familiar faces abounded, basking in the euphoria that beer and sunshine never failed to deliver. On the bill before us was Liverpool actress-comedienne Margie Clark, who was expanding her repertoire into the world of music. What dazzling new form would the pop genre take when filtered through her chameleon-like interpretive talents? Situationist techno, Japanese club pop drum and bass, a Brechtian take on the Delta blues perhaps, or Scouse brass with a heart of gold sounding like Ma Boswell backed by the Anti-Nowhere League. Yep, we were definitely on a winner if we were going on directly after this. Her opening shot was The Clutter from the Gutter, because we are, aren't we, girls? And things went downhill from there. Mercifully, soon it was our turn to take to the stage with the assistance of the Wango crew, who had entered into the spirit of things by dressing as giant bees. A 140-pound dreadlocked insect smoking a spliff helped me on stage with my gear, and we were ready to go. Everything went swimmingly until Liver and Kidneys. Awful title, I know. A song based around the urban myth about waking up on a park bench to discover you've had your internal organs stolen. Now, I'll hold my hands up and admit that P&AF weren't the greatest singers in the world. They were superb frontmen, though, just not too hot at after-dinner speaking. Even so, the frequent short circuits between brain and mouth that occurred beggared belief at times. And P's intro went something like this. This is about having your kidneys removed. Pauses to wait for inspiration to strike. Mind you, round here you've all had your brains removed. Now, this would have been provocative stuff in most places, but in Liverpool, how can I put it? And I risk becoming the new Salman Rushdie by saying it. The legendary sense of humour is strictly one way. It's like black guys calling each other nigger. If you're not in the gang, don't even think about it. When Al first heard Body Count, Ice-T's hard rock outfit, he thought they must be the hardest bunch of white dudes ever to pick up an instrument. Either that, or they had a death wish. But I say, Liverpudlians, my former neighbours, you're sharp, creative and funny, and nobody's having a go. Not even Harry Enfield. Well, maybe him a bit, but get over it. Anyway, short of a few smirks and rolled eyes, none of us gave this throwaway comment another thought. It was just a bit of fun on a fun day. But unbeknownst to us, a group of local nightclub bouncers were in the crowd, and they took a different spin on it. It strikes me as a bit odd, this whole scenario. Picture the scene on Friday night down at Capone's or Cagney's or some other scurry joint. Hey, Carl, there's a fun day on tomorrow with face painting and all that for the kids. Why don't we all, go down there? Because, we never, socialise much outside of work. I mean, come on. I don't know if it was during that number or the next one, but suddenly there were two shaven-headed bruisers on stage, beating 7 shades out of AF and P. They both fought their corner, with P taking the blows like a middleweight pro and continuing to sing throughout the assault. The scene got even crazier when the Bees jumped in to break it up, and they somehow managed to get them off stage. The ugly brutes were ranting on and pointing, saying that we'd said the people of Liverpool had no brains, while the rest of the crowd were going mad and calling them wankers, from a safe distance, of course. At the end of the set, we bounded off the back of the truck sharpish, and the two singers were swiftly hidden in one of Wango's caravans. I can still picture their worried faces peering through a wooden porthole. The rest of us quickly removed suits and masks and set about dismantling the gear. Sure enough, the steroid twins appeared, followed by a sizable contingent of the crowd, and they began interrogating everyone in sight about the whereabouts of the band. One of them approached me and Phil. "Where are that band who said the people of Liverpool are stupid?" he growled. We stood before the thick-necked retard, instruments in hand, and replied, "Dunno, mate, I think they've gone. We just work here." He looked far from satisfied with our response. But would he put two and two together? Nah, fat chance. The lummox couldn't even count to two, let alone tackle complex mathematical additions. So he wandered off looking for someone else to terrorise. The more they badgered and bullied anyone brave enough to challenge them, the weaker the original argument became. Pete Moran was amongst the people backstage. I was there that day with about a 20-strong group of PEH-friendly scousers. When the trouble started to brew and you fellas made a slick exit backstage, we decided that it would be a good idea to get round there promptly and give a bit of support. You guys made a pretty clean getaway, but one of our number was grabbed by a member of the Bouncers' Tea Party. He asked politely, "Hey, you prick, have you seen some dickheads with big pointy heads?" Which we presumed to mean the band. With this, my mate burst out laughing and received a badly aimed smack to the top of the head, which did no damage. The bouncer then grabbed a large bottle of Coke out of his hand, sneered at him and went off drinking it. One of the others of our party said, "Ah, bollocks, I've just put a quarter of a litre of vodka in there, and now I've lost it." This was quickly followed by the pronouncement of one of the others there. "Don't worry about it, mate. I've just put 15 trips in there, so you won't be the only one losing it." We only managed to catch one glimpse of the bouncer in question later on, but the telltale signs of the incipient stages of cosmic souping were quite evident. The Peasley Cross fan. OK, this one wasn't strictly our fault, but I can't imagine it happening at anyone else's gig. It was at one of our Peasley Cross Labour Club shows, which had become landmark local events that always drew a big crowd. As mentioned elsewhere, I think our music in itself had little to do with the appeal of these nights for a lot of the audience. It was more the atmosphere and the buzz, and let's face it, St Helens was no frequent visitor to the higher end of the Richter scale of excitement. Yet somehow, we'd managed to tap into a rich vein of counterculture by being in the right place at the right time. Maybe in every Royston Vasey, there's a Haight-Asbury just waiting to be unleashed, and we attracted the entire spectrum of the Northwest's freaks, heads and party animals. Everyone around here understood our potato, and as I've also stated, we never had any trouble from the fans. Except on this occasion, when a fan hospitalised Biscuit's girlfriend Jill. An occurrence that under normal circumstances would lead to more grievous injury. But there was no retaliation, mainly because it was a ceiling fan. It came loose from its position above the crowd due to the bass end vibrations and came crashing down on the poor girl's head. Fortunately, during the last number, so there was some relative calm in which to deal with the situation. Somebody went to locate the club's secretary, and as it was fairly evident what had occurred, you'd imagine it would be simple enough to establish the facts. But things were never that straightforward in clubland. Committees were nefarious and ever-changing entities with more of an eye on a fast buck and a scam than minor details like health and safety regulations. So if the odd mandatory rule was overlooked, it was simply the nature of the game. Mostly, the left hand didn't even know who the right hand was, let alone what it was doing, only that it was in all likelihood a backhand with a finger in every pie. What this all added up to in practical terms was that the club secretary was less than keen to admit liability for the incident, and if possible, deny all knowledge of it. And his strategy for disassociating himself and the club bordered on Python-esque. When faced with the offending article, he took a long, measured and considered look at it before shaking his head and intoning, "Nah, it's not one of ours. Someone must have brought it in and put it there." This theory, while implausible enough in itself, was thrown further into question by the fan-shaped hole in the ceiling directly above it. But he wouldn't be swayed. He wasn't about to fall for the old extractor fan in the back pocket routine, no siree. Things were bad enough without some wise guy trying to pull a fast one. And off he went, tut-tutting and shaking his head, leaving behind an open-jawed and bemused group of confused onlookers. Only in St. Helens. Take your protein pills. To be continued.
Poisoned electric head, poisoned electric head, poisoned electric, 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 poisoned electric head, poisoned electric head, poisoned electric.